Good evening, future lawyers of America. This is Joshua Craven along with Evan Jones. We are the founders of Lawschooli.com. Like I said, my name is Josh Craven. Started studying for the LSAT. When I first took a prep test, I was at a 152. 152 was where I wanted to go. It wasn't going to get me into the law school that I wanted to attend. And so I started panicking. But through a few months of really dedicated practice, I was able to raise that score to a 177. Changed my life completely. It changed my prospects completely. Everything changed. So I personally know how important this exam is to you. And I know how much, just really focused study can change your life, improve your score, really improve your prospects for law school, get you scholarship money. I ended up on a scholarship at University of Chicago, the largest scholarship they offered. At University of Chicago, I met my good friend, Mr. Evan Jones, who's with me here tonight. Evan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, oddly enough, Josh and I just started studying like at exactly the same time. This is before we knew each other. But we sort of actually had a very similar experience, struggling to find any sort of good resources at first. And then finally, I found something that works for me. And, after 3 months of like eating, breathing, and sleeping the LSAT, I was able to put in what I consider a really great score, 173, and went to U Chicago, where Josh and I ended up in the same section, and the rest is history. So we really we've tried to sort of become the gurus for people that are studying for the LSAT on their own, and self-motivating to do this thing, because that's what we did. We've had great results with that. And, now several years later, we've helped hundreds and hundreds of students do the same. So, we're just launching a brand new LR course that we think is the most comprehensive out there. And to sort of support that, we wanted to give you a chance to meet us and maybe work through a few concepts together that can some ideas about how to improve your own thinking on the LSAT. So
Tonight, we thought we'd talk a little bit about causal reasoning. It's a really important concept on the LSAT. It shows up on a variety of question types, and I think that it's sort of a good foundation to your logical reasoning. Reasoning accounts for 50% of this exam, so it's really important to lock this section down. And understanding concepts like causal reasoning are sort of a great foundation upon which you can build your logical reasoning skills and achieve great results on this exam. Evan, what are causal arguments?
Yeah, so causal arguments are very simply an argument that says that one thing, an argument that not merely says, but concludes, and that's an important distinction we'll talk about later, an argument that concludes that one thing is the cause of something else, that thing A is the source of thing B, an effect, right, is the cause of the effect. So here's an example argument. Before heavy logging began in the area, the river was largely clear of silt. Now it's so jammed with silt that dredging is required to keep it clear. Therefore, to reduce silt in the river, logging here should be stopped. So this argument concludes that something, heavy logging, is the cause of something else, silt, right? Silt appearing in the river. So basically, this is a very straightforward concept, but it does take a little while to develop this skill of seeing that an argument contains this feature of arguing for a cause and effect. It either concludes that or depends on that connection to make it so. Moving on to causal arguments are best understood as a form of inductive reasoning. Okay, and that means that the truth of the argument's conclusion is not necessarily guaranteed by the truth of the premises. In fact, the argument is designed to work that way. It's just that it's just an argument where they're providing evidence for why you should accept the conclusion. We want to contrast this with deductive reasoning, which is the type of reasoning, if you've done the LSAT LRA section before, you're already likely familiar with. Deductive reasoning is where, by an argument's form, if the premises are true, it guarantees the truth of the conclusion, right? So an example might be, if Evan plays golf, Josh will play golf too. Evan is playing golf, Josh is playing golf. If those premises are true, that Evan is playing golf and that if Evan plays golf, Josh will play golf. If those premises are true, then the conclusion that Josh will play golf too must be true, right? So we're contrasting that form with an argument like this, like the one we just looked at, the siltation argument, where it just provides evidence for that conclusion, and that conclusion is not guaranteed. So causal arguments are always of that latter type, where the truth of the conclusion is not guaranteed, right? When you see that the argument's conclusion is that something caused something else, just remember that on the LSAT, that is never guaranteed. So talk about why that's important in a little bit.
So let's talk about the causal relationship. And can you go into a little bit more detail about the causal relationship?
Yeah, so when you're arguing that two things caused each other, obviously out there in the world is some truth, but you don't really know whether it's true that that thing caused that effect. So we're talking here about some things that have to be true if there actually was a causal relationship. So the first feature here is correlation. The two things have to appear together, right? If they don't appear together, there could be no possible that one caused the other. So if you don't see some connection between the two things, then there's no way that one's causing the other.
Now,
maybe, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about correlation versus?
Yeah,
correlation doesn't necessarily
mean causation. But if you don't see correlation, then there would be no possible way that there is causation, right? So, yeah, just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other. But if they don't happen together ever, well, then there's no way that they're causing each other. So, yeah, a little bit complicated there. This is why we have very long fully explain this stuff. But yeah, in this intro, just remember, if they're not together, they're not caused. And even more than that, we're going to get into here the topic of temporality. Causes need to precede effects. Contrast this with conditional relationships, right? If Evan plays golf, then Josh plays golf. There, Evan playing golf doesn't need to happen before Josh playing golf, right? They may just go at the same time. But the causal relationship is different. The cause always has to come before the effect. In our logging example, the logging would have to precede the siltation. If it didn't, then we would say, well, it looks like something else might have caused the siltation, right? So temporality, cause always comes before effect. And then with causation, there needs some mechanism. And you might not know what this mechanism is. And in fact, when scientists make causal arguments, they often don't yet know. But there has to be some plausible mode of action whereby the cause could bring about the effect. Like, say, we have a disease and they're trying to argue that a certain pathogen, for example, caused it. Well, we don't maybe know exactly how that virus caused it, but we know that it would work by attacking cells. That would have some mechanism that it was messing up the body. If there's no plausible mechanism, a causal argument starts to look very suspicious. A typical example might be in sports. This is how superstitions come about. If I tap my shoe before I go up to playing baseball, and then I get a home run, and I think that tapping my shoe caused that, well, there's no real plausible mechanism whereby tapping my shoe actually caused me to hit a home run. So even though a superstition might form in my mind that one thing caused the other because it came before, the temporality is there, the correlation is there, the mechanism is not, right? So there needs to be a plausible mechanism and not just something that's like way harebrained, and not real.
So why learn this stuff? Why is it important to learn about causality?
Yeah, so learning about not just causality, but learning about the features of it, like we just discussed, temporality, mechanism, correlation. This gives you ways to attack these arguments. If I see somebody argues for a cause and effect, but I say, oh, well, there's no real plausible mechanism there. That must just be that one thing preceded the other. You're just tapping on your shoe. Even if you hadn't have tapped on your shoe, you might have hit the home run, right? Or say that I say, oh, well, you're arguing that that thing caused the other, but in fact, the effect came before the cause. So, learning about things, these features give you these feature arguments give you ways to attack it. If I can show that two things don't always occur together, well, maybe one thing isn't causing the other, or at least sometimes some is a better explanation for that, right? So it gives you ways to attack these arguments.
Why don't we take a look at another example here, Evan? In ancient China, you want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. In ancient China, laws against beer were enacted and subsequently repealed 41 times between 1100 and 1400. Leaders at that time issued frequent injunctions against intemperate behavior and counseled moderation when drinking. Hence, it is likely that these laws were designed to curb excessive drinking. So the argument here is cause attitudes that were hostile to drinking, and then the effect was regulation to curb that drinking, right? And so if we wanted to talk about like the cause and effect here, well, if we want to talk about correlation, clearly there's correlation here, right? These laws were being enacted at the same time that we saw these attitudes against drinking. As far as like temporality, we might have to get more closely into the details. We might need more information, but it looks like, at least in some cases, these injunctions against drinking, against intemperate behavior, did precede these laws. So it looks pretty good here with the temporality. As far as mechanism, well, the leaders presumably were the people with powers to make rules, to make laws. So yeah, it looks plausible that there was a mechanism, that these people with these attitudes against drinking made regulations. However, new information could come to light that might call into question some of those things, right? Say, for example, you were to learn that there was a powerful vodka industry at that time, right? And that they really, really didn't want beer to be made tax-free or something like that. So then that would be like looking like an alternate cause for why these injunctions happen, rather than it being about intemperate behavior.
So, right? So Evan, that's a great example of attacking causal arguments. How you're sort of finding an alternate possible cause for it. So let's talk a little bit more about attacking these causal arguments, and why is that so important here on LSAT questions when you see these causal arguments, thinking about.
Yeah, so mainly we see causal arguments on the LSAT in the context of two very, very major question types that appear really frequently: weaken and strengthen. So we talked about how causal arguments are attackable. The truth of those premises in these arguments doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So new information can always come to light that will weaken or alternatively strengthen those arguments. So let's look at some ways to sort of first attack an argument, a causal argument. Yes, skip ahead quick. We can come back to this example later.
All right.
Yeah, so keep going. Yeah, so weakening a causal argument. The first thing to do is you need to identify the cause and effect being argued for in the conclusion and be fairly precise about it. Okay. Then in your head, treat the argument as if it will definitely hold true, right? So this means that, for the sake of attacking the argument, act as if it's going to hold true across all possible times, and that when this cause happens, it'll always lead to this effect, right? And then we look for causal weakeners. And
those causal weakeners are these 6 common causal weakeners.
Okay.
The first one is an alternate cause. Evan, can you talk a little bit about alternate causes?
Yeah, an alternate cause would be some competing explanation for why that effect occurred. So this is probably the simplest and most common way to attack a causal argument. If you find some alternate cause that explain that effect, or even potentially could explain that effect, it casts doubt on the original cause that was being argued for. It gives an alternative explanation and thus weakens that causal conclusion, right?
Number 2 is the common cause. Evan?
Yeah, a common cause would be finding something whereby it's stating that some other thing was actually the cause of the argued for cause and the effect. So rather than this cause causing this effect, some other thing actually caused those both, right? So a common cause, and you're showing that it's actually having 2 effects.
Absolutely. And number 3 is the reversed cause and effect.
Yeah, this would be a big one if temporality was a factor. If you could actually show, for example, the effect preceded the cause. So that relationship may be reversed. What you originally thought was the cause might be the effect, and vice versa, right?
Number 4 is the cause without the effect.
Yeah, cause without the effect is very simple. Just show that the cause happened, but the effect didn't in at least one situation, and you've weakened an argument, right?
Number 5 is the effect without the cause.
Yeah,
reverse
same
situation.
thing. Yeah, reverse situation, effect occurring, no cause before it, no correlation whatsoever with the cause. Even in one situation, if you can find that, it's weakened the argument, right?
And number 6 is bad data or statistics.
Yeah, and this is a really rare one that you would see this on the LSAT. But if you can show that you're doing a good job at collecting the evidence when they like observe this effect,
so like maybe like a small sample size or something like that.
Precisely. Yeah, only seeing one example of the cause causing the effect, something like that.
So these are all ways you can weaken causal arguments. So this would be, definitely a go-to list to try to go through kind of your mental checklist if you run into a causal argument on a weakened question, right, Evan?
Yeah, exactly. Now, and we can get it so it's built into your head that, to look for these things. Like if right now this feels like an information overload, when we take you through this in our lessons, it's slowed down and we give you examples of each of these.
It's really important to kind of sit with this stuff and see different examples. And obviously in a short webinar format, it's tough to do all that. So we wanted to kind of give you the highlights and the bullet points, things to pay attention to as you're working through these problems. Tons more information in the course. Now, the second most common place where you'll see causal arguments would be strengthening questions. So let's talk about strengthening a causal argument.
Yeah, so strengthening a causal argument, you're defending it against all the potential attacks that we just looked at. So it's really the opposite of that process. Again, because these are arguments only provide evidence for the conclusion, here we're providing more evidence. So let's look at the 6 ways that we would want to do that.
So the 6...
We'll go through them fairly quickly this time because they're just the opposite.
6 causal strengtheners. Number 1, eliminate alternate causes.
Yeah, so eliminating some alternate cause, like in our silting the river effect, if you could show that there was just much heavier, if you could show, for example, that there was not heavier rain that year, so, heavier rain was not a potential competing alternate cause, something like that, right?
Number 2, eliminate common cause. Same sort of thing.
Yeah, limit with that. I mean, common cause is kind of related to an alternate cause because it's just a variety of that. in common cause, you're showing that, a third thing was the cause of both the originally argued for cause and the effect. So just eliminating that possibility.
Number 3, no reversed cause and effect.
Yeah, just showing temporality, showing that the cause is or the effect, and that relationship is not reversed. The effect is not the one causing the cause. Yeah, it's a little complicated there, but yeah.
And the cause with effect.
Yeah, just anytime you can show examples of the cause happening and the effect, any additional examples of that cause occurring with the effect strengthens the argument a tiny bit.
And the reverse effect with the cause, same concept.
Thing.
Number 6, good data.
A consistent appearance of this relationship over time, being very clear that it was actually observed and not, just mistakenly believed to be observed, stuff like that.
So we're talking about moving the needle one way or another, right?
Yeah. So, with these causal arguments, again, because new evidence can always come to light that's going to affect that conclusion. When you're looking for things that strengthen and weaken it, you just want to think about moving the needle a tiny, tiny bit in the direction you want, right? If you're strengthening the argument, you want to move it towards supporting the argument's conclusion. You want to see one of those 6 things, however small, that we just looked at, that move it towards the conclusion that you want. Now, if you're trying to weaken it, you're moving it away from that conclusion to make it look ever so more slightly even more likely that other possible conclusions exist. Like competing conclusions would be that cause doesn't cause that effect, or some other cause causes that effect, or some common cause is the cause of both that cause and effect, right? So looking at those other possible conclusions, if you're giving evidence that moves the needle towards that, you're weakening the argument. So we'll really teach you to think like in terms of this diagram, and just making really, really teach you how to evaluate how information affects any causal argument that you find. And, we'll even show you how to, be aware of information that just does not affect that argument whatsoever. Right. Yeah.
And can you talk a little about your new logical reasoning course that you recently launched on Lawschooli?
Yeah. So about it, it took me to build it to this point about a year, and it's what it is we have a video course that both video and text lessons, right? Because we want to try and reinforce the concept. So they're complementary. I think a lot of courses out there, you see they just have a video and then a transcript of that video, whereas we try to have a video that then teaches it differently than the text, which subsequently kind of enlarges on the topic and goes into more detail, which sort of comports with the way I would really want to learn this stuff, like kind of hearing it 2 different ways so that I can really be sure that I have a grasp on the concept.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the overlying philosophy of the course? I noticed that your sort of approach to this is pretty different than some other courses, whereas other courses seem to be really just kind of throw you into these questions without a lot of background. You really try, it seems at least, to build up these fundamental building blocks by like this and going into great detail on each sort of building block concept before you throw people into the question types. Is there a
yeah? So a lot of courses pretty much essentially just sort of give you shortcut methods to attack the problems. But what I noticed was that students who actually do really well on the LSAT, that actually really crush the LR section, obtain the same understanding of this material that the makers of the tests themselves have. And what tests really know? Well, they have a very strong foundation in logic that is completely independent of the LSAT, right? So they just understand very deeply how arguments are formed, how they're structured, and how to analyze whether conclusions are supported or not supported, right? Conclusions of So we really just wanted to seek to give people that exact same understanding and focus on teaching you logic before you really start worrying too much about the questions. And that way you're under much less stress while you're learning it. And it's like kind of that scene in Karate Kid where we just have you washing the car, and you don't think you've really learned anything. But then when you finally attack the questions, it's like you're already, fighting perfectly. So that's kind of how this course is structured, to teach you logic in a very chill, straightforward way, and then get you, attacking the questions when you're already a master, kind of.
Yeah, that's a great great analogy. I found when I was going through my LR, I started by doing a ton of questions, and I just wasn't getting it. Really just getting stuck. And I sort of hit this plateau at like 160 or so, which, it was not terrible, but it wasn't where I needed to be. And it wasn't until and there were no resources really out there to help me do this. I sort of had to go online and onto Wikipedia and sort of give myself a Logic 101 course based on outside resources that were completely unrelated to the LSAT. But by having, I think it's really great to have a resource to teach you these foundations of logic and then how they apply to each question type, right? Because, causal reasoning, like we mentioned, you've got weakened questions, strengthened questions. It's going to show up in flaw questions, assumption questions. And you're going to, know so much more about how to attack each of those question types by having that solid foundation of causal reasoning. What are some other topics that you go into depth in on the course that are sort of foundational that you think are really important?
Yeah, so we talked about this as a form of inductive reasoning, but really the first thing we look at in the course is deductive reasoning, how to see whether an argument whether an argument proves its conclusion or not, right? In a properly formed deductive argument, if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true as well. In other words, that conclusion can be inferred from the premises, right? So learning these various rules of inference to spot an argument and know whether that conclusion then is absolutely proved true is a critical skill, right? So that's really where we start out, giving you that skill to analyze those argument forms and learn about various valid forms of inference. And again, this course teaches you what you would learn in, a basic Logic 101 course, like a Philosophy 101 course, where you're learning about symbolic logic, right? So, if you do have the opportunity to go through that course, for a lot of people might be still in school, definitely take an intro to logic. I think it's great, but we're going to give you all that material here so that you can access it as many times as you need to when you're studying.
We got a question from somebody that says, which day of the week is the course? Can you explain a little bit about the format of the course?
So you may have noticed a schedule. That's just a release schedule. You can go at your own pace. We do have schedules that we I think if you go through it on that 35-day schedule that you see there, that would be a very reasonable pace to do it. However, you're really allowed to go at your own pace. About a third of the lessons have already dropped, and they're going to be dropping at a pretty rapid pace here. So, I wouldn't go through the course any faster than around 35 days or so, but you can really kind of go at your own pace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Will the course be integrated into the study plans of the Mastermind group lessons? And everybody, by the way, if anyone has a question, you may be noticing that we're answering questions, go to the questions tab and in your GoToWebinar control panel there, and feel free to ask any questions. We're going to stick around for a while. And in the meantime, if you want to join the logical reasoning course, % off tonight. If you go to Lawschooli.com/LR2018, that'll take you to your shopping cart. You get 40% off tonight. The logical reasoning course. It's a really great course. I highly recommend it for everybody. If you want to join the Mastermind group, which I'll have Evan here explain in a moment. If you go to that same link, Lawschooli.com/LR2018, and then you can just remove the logical reasoning course from your cart and add the Mastermind group to your cart back in our store, and the coupon will apply to anything you buy. So if you want to buy the schedules, if you want to buy the Mastermind group, if you want to buy the LR course, anything you buy tonight will be 40% off. This is a special just for those of you who are here in the decided to come and join us for this webinar tonight. So please join. I really do think Evan has worked very hard to make, I believe, the most comprehensive resource. We had a student recently get a was it 178 or 179? I believe it was a 178. Yeah, she was the first person from the Mastermind group to beat my 177 score. And keep in mind, a 177 is like a 99.8 percentile score. So very, very few people beat that score. And we recently had somebody get a 178. She credited her score to this LR course. So I'm,
yeah, because this LR course is now a refined version of what we already had in the Mastermind group, and I'm seeing will this course be included and available for members of that Mastermind group? Yes. So if you're joining the Mastermind group, you don't need to pay separately for this. Again, just to clarify, the Mastermind group is for people who don't know, that's like our private course area where you have access to any course material that we make, any and all, covering LG, RC, and LR, right? You have office hours with Josh and I where you can ask us as many questions as you want. You have a private forum where you can, again, ask us questions whenever you want, and we're going to answer those. And then a ton of question explanations as well, both videos on logic games and written LR explanations, and the ability to request explanations whenever you want. So
so back to the original question, will the course be integrated in the study plans and the lessons on the Mastermind group?
Yeah, so the schedules already bring you through these lessons. If you just buy a regular schedule, these are in there as optional. Like those also bring you through the resource that Josh and I both use to study for the test, which is the Logic Reasoning and Logic Games Bible, the Power Score Bible. We still feel those are really good resources, and people often benefit a lot from learning from multiple different sources. So, even if you are working with our LR course, if you feel, I feel that our LR course, I'm proud of and does it better than anything else, but it's always good to see things from multiple perspectives, right?
Yeah, and just so it's clear, Lawschooli started out as a resource where we just kind of told people how we prepped for the LSAT. And then as we've been around for years, we've integrated our own resources into things, but we still have this sort of underlying mission of just helping students do better on this test. And that means we're really the only people, like the only LSAT prep company out there, and we are paid $0 from PowerScore, by the way. But we're the only people out there to just be honest with you and say, hey, frankly. I know, right? But they don't. So we're the only people out there that say, yeah, look, there are other resources that are good too, including these PowerScore Bibles. And frankly, I would never say anything bad about them because they're great resources. They're one of the reasons that I got a 177. I do think that that our courses are great too. And I think improve the most by accessing a few different resources. I know I had like 7 different. I bought every book on the market at the time, literally, and I read them all. And I do believe that having that sort of diversity of opinion and different approaches to things kind of allows you to tailor your own approach that works best for you. And so that's one of the reasons why we've never stopped recommending other people's products that we are useful. So I just wanted to clarify that. If I join the Mastermind course, will the LR course be included and available to members? Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Just to clarify again, yes.
Dwight Walton asks, what's the best way to study for the LSAT? That I think is also going to depend on the person, right? Like if you are just a bookworm and you love to just sit with a book and figure this out yourself, then I think, books and our LR course is very heavy text-based, right? A lot of courses are usually just video, and they just teach you on video, and I'm not the kind of person that can just watch a video and then understand something. I need to really sit with it. I need to read and reread. And so I like books and I like text. So we created a course that has the video element, but also is very, very heavily text-based. So you have both. You have got the audio-visual learners that can learn from the videos, and you've got the sort of more text-based learners like myself who can learn from reading the text. And by getting it in two different ways, I believe you have the best chance of doing, of really starting to understand these concepts. We've got another question. Oh, so what's the best way to study? And then if you were somebody who really needs your hand held and really needs to kind of be led along, then maybe this isn't for you. Maybe even reading books isn't for you. Maybe you need to think about a live course with somebody like PowerScore or Blueprint or Test Masters.
Manhattan. Yeah.
Or Manhattan Prep. Like, those are the companies that we would recommend if you need a live course in your town. Manhattan, Blueprint, PowerScore, and Test Masters are 4 good resources with good live courses.
Yeah, they've been around forever.
Clear away from Princeton Review, Kaplan. I don't think they do quite as an effective job. And if somebody has a question, you can ask us why we think that, and we can tell you. But just take our word for it if you want.
Yeah, generally, guys, you want to stay, if just some advice as you steer through this whole prep process, because I know there's a lot of information out there. Generally, you're best off with people who specialize in the LSAT and got started there, right? Somebody like a Princeton Review, they don't care about the LSAT, like it's just like a little tiny thing for them, whereas, Manhattan, Test Masters, us, PowerScore, that we all got started, just for the LSAT and have, for the most part, still continue to specialize in that, and I think generally the quality of information from those sources is much, much better. Right. Somebody said, do you guys do anything where you offer a session to look at an applicant's profile in order to determine their chances before the LSAT? Well, we don't do anything like that. I mean, it's, for one thing, it's always pretty much, it would be completely impossible to look at anything and predict somebody's LSAT score. I mean, you would just have to, if I could predict that, man, I could make a lot of money for sure. But
yeah,
if you're in, you
it's
can,
tough. But if you had like a prep test score and you're saying I'm prepping in the one, I'm, on average prepping in 164, and here's my GPA, and here's sort of my overall application. For Mastermind group members, we'd very frequently in office hours, which are every Tuesday night, we very frequently will get questions. Hey, here's my LSAT score. Here's the school I want to go to. Here's my GPA, and here's sort of the background about me. Can you tell me kind of what are my chances, or what I need to do to improve my chances? That's a very, very, very common question that we answer in office hours every Tuesday night. So, absolutely.
Yeah. So for example, this same person adds like, I'm a splitter 3.47. I wouldn't necessarily consider a 3.47 a splitter GPA. A lot of GPA medians look really inflated right now at the top schools because they just can't get applicants with very good LSAT scores right now as much as they would like to. So they've instead sort of been competing to pull in the students with the best GPAs. However, if you pair a good LSAT with that 3.47, you're probably more desirable than somebody would say a 3.75 and an LSAT like 3-4 points lower, right? So a 3.47 is not going to hold anyone that gets a good LSAT score back from getting into the school of their choice. A 3.47 at worst, it could potentially keep you out of Harvard, but Harvard and Yale, but anywhere else should potentially be okay.
What is the best time to take the LSAT? February, June, September, or November?
The only reason that timing matters is for timing into the application process. Generally, when you look at the application cycle, the earlier you take it, the LSAT, the better, because it gives you chances to potentially retake, without having to move into another cycle. You always have chances to retake, but it might mean if you're taking the February LSAT and you don't do well, retaking is going to mean that you're now looking at the next application cycle, right? So yeah, there's no time that's better than others. I personally think taking in summer, I think a lot of you are studying for June, is the best because you're less likely to get a cold in summer. And also, they give that test at noon as opposed to 9 a.m., which for me is critical. I'm not a morning person. I can barely think at 9 a.m. So, I've always liked the June test. They're adding a bunch of new test dates now, so we don't
So
quite
now we
know.
also have a July test date, so here I'll say for this cycle, if it were me, I would take in June with a backup in July. So if I'm not scoring where I need to be by June, or I take the June test and my score isn't where I want, I've got that July test date, which comes about, I think it's 5 or 6 weeks later. So you've got this rapid retake that you have the opportunity to do. So if you bomb the June test, something doesn't go right, or if you're just not quite where you want to be and you decide to delay your test date, which is not that uncommon, right? You've got this backup July test date that you can always go for. I think, so this cycle in particular, I really like that June, July, boom, boom, take those two and be done with it. And then the next test date is September, and then there's November, then there's a January 2019 and a March 2019 when you're getting into there. Now, all else equal, you want to get your applications in as soon as possible within the cycle. So it's another reason to aim for these June, July test dates. So you've got 2 shots before applications ever open, and you've got a couple of LSAT scores that you can apply with and get things in as soon as the applications open. We've got 2 months, 27 days until June, so you've got plenty of time to study. Hop on the 3-month schedule. And I think that's a really great way to take yourself right into the June test date.
Just want to quickly show somebody asked, in the MMG course, in the Mastermind course, how do they access the new LR materials? So you can always see this tab that just says course here. And then you come down into these, and you could either hit expand all if you wanted, or, you just need to go down past all the games lessons, and then LR starts with the LR introduction. And this can give people a look at all those lessons here too. And then this is the LR arguments introduction, where we talk about argument structure. And then we get into deductive logic here. And then down into inductive reasoning, and then finally, cause and effect, which we talked about tonight. So then flawed reasoning, bunch of other stuff. So it's always just accessible right there in that course tab for members there. We try to make it easy to click through to the various areas here.
Yeah. So join the Mastermind group, join the logical reasoning course. I don't think you'll be let down. We do offer a 10-day, 15-day money back guarantee. If you don't like it, you'll get your money back. So there's really no risk, and just let us know. And we're always working to improve. So if ever anything isn't working for you, or something you want something explained a little bit better, especially if you're a Mastermind group member, we're very responsive to questions in the forums, and during office hours. We are constantly working with students to make improvements in our courses, to make sure that they understand everything and to help everybody out. Somebody said Kaplan is terrible. Yeah. I studied with Kaplan when I graduated from college, and it was absolutely terrible. Then I purchased the Bibles, and now I'm here. Now you're on the right track. Bibles and our resources, I think that's all you need. Both of those, you're really on the right track.
I don't know. I don't know why these companies are so terrible. They have tons of money. They potentially could make, but I think that their idea is to just kind of put out something that, grabs the sort of disinterested person that doesn't even really, necessarily want to make too much effort to get better. And they give you a few tips that might improve you, 5 points or something, and that's it. And then call it a day. for people who are really focused on getting the absolute most out of, really maximizing their potential on the LSAT, Kaplan or something is not gonna do the job.
Yeah, and look,
our course demands a whole lot more out of you, right?
Yeah.
Like it's incredibly, it's a lot of material to go through, but the result is if you put in that work, you're really going to get something out of it. I can, I'm confident that I can make you guys analyze these questions exactly the same way that the people who wrote the questions do, right? And that's going to be a completely different level of understanding than you're going to get with something like a Kaplan. I mean, when I did this test myself, I didn't even really feel like I had that complete understanding yet. It's sort of built through years of teaching these questions all the time. So that's what I really want to try and get you guys to that level.
Evan, how many points did you improve on the LSAT from your initial diagnostic to?
Yeah, I was down probably around like a 1. When I took my first diagnostic, it was like an absolute disaster. I don't even think I really was using like full timing, so it might have even been worse, but it was low 150s ish, somewhere in there. Like to me, looking at a logic game, I was like, I don't even know how you would ever do this in 15 minutes, let alone, 7 or 8 minutes that you need to, and I think my LR, I was a little more okay there, but, I just really didn't know what they were asking for with this, like, what's a necessary assumption, stuff like that. And then I improved to a 173. So at least about 20-point jump in my score over the course.
And that's the difference between going, maybe getting into one of the top 100 schools versus getting a scholarship at a top 5 school. I mean, it's an incredible difference in the quality of education that you're going to get, the amount of money that you're going to spend, and your opportunities after law school. I can't overstate how important this test is and how much studying for it works. Like, that's the thing about this test. That's the thing. It's like the SAT, ACT. Maybe you tried studying for those and you couldn't really improve. The LSAT doesn't. It's not like that. The LSAT, people who study for the LSAT very, very, very frequently learn a lot and make huge gains. The LSAT is a much more learnable exam, and it really, studying for this test really does generate results, and especially if you're using good resources, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the SAT is fairly learnable too. I mean, that's like,
is it?
that's
boring
learning vocab. This test is really interesting, and especially if you learn with us, you're going to actually learn logic, which is something that I think people just generally should want to know.
Does your course offer help with the writing section?
No, well, the MMG does. I mean, we're happy to talk about the writing section in there. The writing section, guys, is not scored, right?
Yeah.
I really, beyond just doing one practice run through of that one time before you take the test, it's not something you should stress about. It doesn't go into your score. There's some debate as to whether law schools even actually read it. So yeah, do not worry.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the writing section in terms of reading comprehension, that's a whole different thing. And yeah, we do provide help for that in
the Mastermind group, not in the logical reasoning course, of course.
Yeah.
One last question. Where were the other test resources that you recommended? Lawschooli, Test Masters, Power Score. Oh, what were the other test resources? Lawschooli, Test Masters, Power Score, Blueprint.
In Manhattan. Yeah. Those are all companies that people don't complain about. We generally see much more positive feedback. Like at one point I was fairly familiar with, like, of course I'm familiar with Power Score's techniques still. At one point I was pretty familiar with Blueprint. The others, I mean, I don't look at, so I'm just sort of reporting to you that,
based on like literally thousands of students we've talked to, we consistently, so we get a lot of feedback about a lot of different courses out there, and Princeton Review, we always hear bad things about. These other ones, we hear generally quite good things about. So, no worries. In the LRA section, especially when we get to the question in the 20s, Once we find an answer choice, can we stop and move to the next question?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think on earlier questions, if you're like in 1 to 10, 1 to 11, if you're really confident with the answer choice there's probably very little value in analyzing those other ones. Maybe a quick glance to make sure that you didn't misread something. With the harder questions, when you get into the 20s, I think there is often a real benefit from analyzing all 5 of the answers.
Yeah, I would almost always unless you're in like a real time crunch and this is like strictly a timing issue and you just have to, and you're pretty confident in your answer and you just have to get to the next question. I think you're almost always well served reading all the answers.
Yeah, because
listen to this segment of the official LSAT instructions. However, you are to choose the best, underlined best answer. That is the response that most accurately and completely answers the question. So there could be 2 answers that are conceivably competing for that best answer choice, right? And it's very, very frequent that the LSAT's going to throw these like 20 range. They love to throw a really tricky false answer up there to get people to bite on it. When they know people are in a time crunch in the 20s, they'll throw a really tricky false answer at say A or B, and then C or D or E is the correct answer choice. And if you just don't make it because you're in a rush, you're going to miss that better answer choice. So be really, really careful about that. Now with logic games, it's different because there is, it's a lot easier to
correct answer on every question. Yeah.
So that's do we have any final questions before we head out tonight? Thanks everybody for coming. I had a really good time. Evan and I, like we said, are really dedicated to helping you guys and gals figure out this test and crush the LSAT. It's been our mission since we started back in 2013, 2012. It's been a few years here, and we've been really proud of all the students that we help, especially in the Mastermind group where we can really get to know you and get to know your journey and work with you on a one-on-one, not a one-on-one basis, but oftentimes ours will be pretty darn cool. Yeah. And it's been our pleasure helping everybody. Last night we had in office hours, we had somebody who is a 2L at Boston University come back and thank us and say hi. And we very frequently get alumni just coming back and saying hi and how grateful they are for our help. And that's what we live for. That's what we're here for, and we love it. And couldn't be happier.
Particularly on this LR course. I mean, I just put my, blood and sweat into this for a long time. So I don't want to exaggerate here, but I'm very certain that it's the best resource out there. And it would just make me very happy if people could, get in there and benefit from it the way, I hope that it's designed to do, which is to get you learning this stuff as well as the makers of the test. That's really my goal.
One more thing I'll say about the Mastermind group is we really do work with students. We're not just about the LSAT in there. People often send us, questions about admissions. They'll send us, sometimes we'll proofread.
Job,
Still have alumni, people coming in 2L year saying, hey, Josh, and Evan, I'm thinking about this job versus this job. I got accepted to these 2 positions in law school, and I'm trying to decide. Can you help me out? And we'll sit down with people that we helped with the LSAT 3 years ago who are making job decisions now.
Yeah, we should emphasize that anything with us is a lifetime membership. Like I know how stuff gets in the way of LSAT prep. I see a lot of these courses, you buy access for 3 months or something. We want you to have it until, you are done with it. So it's a lifetime. The membership, the LR course is lifetime membership. You don't have to stress about ever losing access to that.
You got a question. How long should you study before taking the LSAT?
Well, it's going to really vary. I mean, I think now there's so many practice problems out there, and there's potentially a massive benefit from doing any given practice problem that's out there, that, you know, we really recommend you do all of the material that's out there. And to do that now, even you know, 3 months is a little bit of a crunch. You know, you have to devote fairly substantial time. I would say, like, you know, around 15 hours a week over the course of that 3 months to get through all that stuff often. You know, so I think 3 months is, you know, kind of always been our baseline minimum. You know, a lot of people have good results with 4, 5, 6 months, especially if they have other responsibilities like school. You know, I got through it in 3 months with a full-time job, but there was fewer prep tests available to practice with back then. You know, I think that even like with studying a whole lot, like I was, I would probably want around 3.5 months because because I had a full-time job. If I didn't have the full-time job, still pretty confident I could give it a good shot in 3 months or even a little under. But yeah, it's worth giving yourself some major time with this stuff because it just takes the brain a little while to make these new connections and get really familiar with these concepts. One thing to learn a concept, another thing to be able to, you know, apply it consistently quickly. So we really want you to be able to get like some time to learn and some time to really practice.
Evan, will there be another webinar? If so, when?
Probably in a couple weeks. You know, like this one, we were kind of trying something new. So if it was a little bumpy, apologies, like with kind of talking about giving a condensed version of some lessons that we have behind, you know, back in the course. But yeah, we'll probably on the next one, we might do a more general topic and we'll probably do it in a couple weeks. But if you want this kind of thing every week consistently for as long as you need it, you know, this is kind of similar in format to what we do in the office hours in the Mastermind group, you know.
Absolutely. Thanks for answering my question. What do you think about to repeat a LR, LG section? Can we repeat it the following week? Can you clarify that question a little bit? What do you think about to repeat a LR? Oh, okay, I get it. So if you take an LR section, should you repeat it the following week after you've taken it, or an LG section?
Yeah, I mean, I'm way into that with an LG section. In fact, I believe that if you struggle with a game, you should probably repeat it then again a few days later. And if that doesn't go well, perhaps, you know, repeat it again. And then even when it does go well, you know, potentially repeat it a week later to see, you know, to kind of reinforce doing it correctly. With LR, you know, I would like the idea of maybe reviewing the problems that you found difficult on a section. I don't think there's much value in probably repeating the whole section over again a week later. You know, if you wanted to go back a week later and look at the problems that gave you trouble, I think that's good review for sure. But
yeah, I don't think it's necessary to do if you go through a game section and you crush it, you don't need to ever go back, you know, and do it again, right? But if you really struggle on a games section, I want you to really go through it and understand it the next day, or you know, even if possible, if you have time, that same day, really go back through it and understand it. Redo it immediately, you know, if you miss a game, right? Spend time with especially the games that you struggle with, especially the problems that you struggle with. Spend time with those, sit with them, really try to figure them out. And if and only if you can't figure them out after spending some time with them, you know, come look for explanations. Or if you're a Mastermind group member, you know, look at the explanations on our site, or ask us in the forums for an explanation. But only after you've really sat with the problems yourself should you go and reach out to an explanation guide, right? Whether it's us or somebody else, right? Make sure you're sitting with those questions and really trying to parse them apart yourself first, immediately after you do the questions, right? Or you do the section, or you do the prep test. Every time you really need to spend more time reviewing the stuff that you're doing than you even spend on going through it the first time, right? That's where you really learn. And I think if you're too quick to jump into explanations, you know, if you go on YouTube or whatever and find an explanation, or you know, for a game, right? If you just do that immediately after taking the game, you're not going to give yourself the opportunity to really grow and really learn. So be careful with explanations. I always want to make sure that people aren't using. I feel like people want to just have the answers fed to them. Right. But that's how I really learned this stuff, was by sitting down with it and struggling with it and going back into the lessons and, pulling it out and figuring it out myself, right? That's what made me learn, right? If somebody just handed me the explanation, I don't think I would have ever done as well as I did on the test. So be careful with those sort of resources, although we do. All right, Evan, it's 9 o'clock, so we have to sign off. But thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. Please, Lawschooli.com/LR2018. Join the course or join the Mastermind group. We'd love to have you. We really enjoy really great questions tonight. You folks seem like you really are on top of this stuff and thinking about the right things. So we'd love to have you in the Mastermind group or in the course. And good luck on everything. And we will see you in a couple weeks for our next webinar.
Thanks a lot for, we had a great time. So have a good night and hope to see some of you guys soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Night. See you guys on the inside.